McGraw-Hill Ascent Audio presents The Science of Dream Teams: How Talent Optimization Can Drive Engagement, Productivity, and Happiness. By Mike Zani. Narrated by Michael Butler Murray. Publisher's note: the print and ebook versions of this book include visual elements and an appendix. You will hear the visuals discussed and referenced in this audiobook. Introduction. In the 1990s, while I was coaching the U.S. Olympic sailing team, a charismatic coach at the University of Tennessee, Pat Summitt, was turning the Tennessee women's basketball team into a dynasty. When she retired in 2012, suffering from early-onset Alzheimer's, she was the winningest basketball coach in American history. One of Summitt's tools for understanding and managing her players was a personality assessment. This was not cutting-edge science. Tests like the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, MBTI, and the Predictive Index had been around for decades. The point is that Summitt, a supremely confident coach, still had the humility to search outside of her own head. She, of course, had personal judgment about the players, how they would mesh, and under which coaching style each one would be most likely to thrive. However, she would also get an outside read from a tool, hoping it might provide valuable insights. It did. Armed with behavioral data, Summitt later said she could see that the star she was recruiting in New York City, a 6'2" powerhouse named Shamika Holdsclaw, was sky-high on leadership and a big risk-taker. A point guard, Kelly Jolly, by contrast, was highly conscientious, a perfectionist. This informed Summitt's recruiting pitch to the players, and later, how she deployed them. When winning narrowly late in games, she wanted the ball in Jolly's hands. Jolly minimized risk. She wasn't likely to throw it away or dribble it off her foot. But when it came time to last-minute shots, the coach wanted Holdsclaw, the risk-taker, to launch them. Each player had special strengths and needs, and the assessment gave Summitt insights into what they were. In 1997 to 1998, the team headed by Holdsclaw and Jolly rolled the table, winning every game. They ended the season at 39-0 and won the NCAA championship. When it came to personality science, Summitt worked with the template that Arthur Daniels had created in the 1950s, the Predictive Index. Finding talent for a turnaround. A decade after Pat Summitt coached her talent-optimized squad to the national championship, I found myself sitting in an insect-infested office with my business partner, Daniel Muskies. We were flipping through a thick pile of resumes, utterly flummoxed about which ones might be promising. Daniel and I had met just a few years earlier at Harvard Business School, where we hatched the fabulous idea of buying used companies with other people's money. We had managed to round up enough capital from investors to buy our first company, a small industrial shop in Westland, a Detroit suburb, popularly known as Wasteland. The company, Ledco, made docking stations and rugged accessories to fit computers into cop cars. It was a steady market. But we had inherited a lackluster workforce of mostly temp laborers, many of whom were missing the drive, skills, and smarts we were looking for. To turn this company around, we needed to hire high performers. Yet 6 months into this venture, we still had little idea how to mine that stack of resumes and find the right people. At Harvard, we had learned a great deal about finance and optimized strategy, but next to nothing about spotting, shaping, and deploying human talent. How clueless were we? In our early days at Ledco, we unwittingly hired a crime boss who used the company job as cover. He turned out to be a star employee. Not surprisingly, he was a gifted leader who read people intuitively and could build culture. I cried when I learned his dark secret. Back when we were wading through resumes, Daniel and I were aware that our methods, centered around unstructured interviews and resumes, were little more than shots in the dark. We knew that managers tend naturally to hire people they're comfortable with, which often turn out to be people like them. The process was inefficient and drenched in personal bias. Somebody, somewhere, we believed, had to know a smarter method for figuring out people. We hunted for answers, and this led us to Vistage, the largest peer advisory group for CEOs. Vistage holds meetings in cities around the world, where small groups of executives share experiences and learnings. Maybe someone there knew how to hire and inspire the right people. I walked into my first meeting in Detroit, and the host asked a member named Dan Corser to introduce me. As part of my registration a few days earlier, I had quickly taken a 6-minute personality assessment. This generated a behavioral profile. I had barely thought about it and never saw the result. But when Dan interpreted this profile to the group, I was stunned, even embarrassed. It had me cold. My extroverted style and humor, my drive, and also darker stuff. My tendency to bulldoze and sometimes to tune people out. I thought, has this guy been talking to my mother? Daniel had a similar experience at another Vistage meeting. This was our introduction to personality testing and the Predictive Index, the same personality assessment that Pat Summitt had used to build championship teams. Tools like this, we saw, could provide insights and direction. Getting a read on each individual, their attitudes about risk and rules, and their likely levels of patience and extroversion, fundamentally changed our ideas about managing people. We soon saw that scientific methods could boost us in every area, in recruiting, coaching, building teams, and managing talent. In fact, talent could become our specialty. This helped us turn Ledco into a profitable company and a market leader. We sold it, and with that success, we looked to grow. As long as our returns to investors were strong, we could raise more money to buy more companies and turn them around by using our expanding repertoire of scientific tools to manage the talent. We bought companies in Florida, Rhode Island, and Texas. But the most enticing company for us was the Predictive Index itself. It was founded in 1955 by Arthur Daniels, who had been introduced to psychometric testing during World War II, specifically to understand why his platoon had managed to fly 30 missions without a single casualty. Daniels made it his career, and the company had honed its behavioral framework for more than a half-century. Its methods had been the subject of hundreds of scientific construct validation studies. The company had a database with millions of profiles and thousands of loyal corporate customers. If we wanted to build a business in the psychology of the workplace, this was a natural target. We were convinced that the science of human resources was poised to explode. Data detailing humanity's behavior was coursing through networks and into computing clouds, and the trove was growing dramatically. New streams of behavioral data were flowing in from body sensors, social networks, and keystrokes, as well as spoken words harvested by machines. Ever stronger AI could discern patterns in the data and predict human responses. Amazon, Google, and Facebook were deploying these tools to dominate their industries. Moneyball tactics were redefining baseball and turning basketball into an endless barrage of three-point shots. Even sailing was turning into a data sport. It was only a matter of time before data science rocked human resources. It would arrive, we believed, with an expanding suite of analytical assessments and tools at its core. This information would guide companies in every aspect of dealing with people, from hiring to matching them in ideal teams. Eventually, entire digital platforms would deliver advanced analytics on the human worker. That was the pitch Daniel and I presented to the family and board of the Predictive Index in 2009. They were very nice, but said no. They just were not ready to sell. 5 years later, in 2014, their circumstances had changed. The last living heir of Arthur Daniels, Elizabeth, already in hospice care, suggested selling the company to those two men who were so passionate about her father's system. We bought it within 6 months. Daniel moved to Massachusetts, and we put the band back together. Our company represents only one niche in an expanding collection of tests and assessments for the workplace. In fact, we use a full panoply of these tools, many of them not made by us. Together, they inform our recruiting, onboarding, team building, and career planning. A groundbreaking global movement is applying science to decisions about people. In this new era, sophisticated assessments, data, and software can give managers in any organization insights into humans never before possible. And this practice, what we call talent optimization, can make hiring, motivating, and managing people more efficient and effective than ever before. It can help build championship basketball teams, ideal workplace project teams, and well-balanced leadership teams. The science involves nearly every data company that engages people in one way or another while they labor. Facebook, Google, and IBM are all rushing to decipher, predict, and optimize the behavior of humans at work. So are a host of startups, many of which are emerging from research labs at top universities. In the right hands and in the right culture, this science promises to unlock vast potential in the workplace and beyond. After all, we humans represent our own most valuable resource. The more we learn about ourselves, our drivers, our fears, and our deepest needs, the better we can direct our lives. It's a big deal. And of course, it's essential for managing our enterprises. I'm a big believer not just in what our company does, but in the broad category of talent optimization. I've done deep dives into the best thinking about the science of people and closely watched what innovators across this category are building to measure and understand human behavior at work. From our expanding base outside Boston, we not only use the science to run our own operations, but we also run what amounts to a growing laboratory, one dedicated to decoding the human worker. We're hardly alone, not by a long shot. An entire movement is underfoot in HR. It's a monster market for a digital revolution that's already stormed media, advertising, and commerce. The education of a people person. For me, learning how to manage people is a never-ending story of discovery. Like many others early in my career, I trusted that I had a competitive edge when it came to figuring people out. I was a people person. Who better to get the most out of every member of a team? At barely 26 years of age, this was the challenge I faced when I was hired to coach the U.S. Olympic sailing team for the 1996 Atlanta Games. The goal was not just to make the team good or great, but the very best in the world. For this, I had to get a bead on each one of these super high performers, many of whom were quirky and all of them intense in their own special way. What did they need to succeed? No less important, I had to figure out how to get them to listen to me. I was not much older than they were and was, in fact, younger than some. In my eyes, I was a wicked good sailor with an eye for sail shape. Yet in the Olympians' eyes, I was just a couple of clicks up from lifeguard. How could I get through to them and establish leadership? Like most other leaders, I used my gut and winged it. Traditional HR professionals, of course, would never admit they wing it. Instead, they insist, as I used to, that certain managers have a feel for people and can intuit which ones fit. It is certainly true that some people are good at reading others. It's one of our evolutionary skills. But it doesn't scale to an entire workforce. And it certainly doesn't mean that we cannot benefit from the information and insights now available from a growing science. The future isn't about turning off human intelligence and judgment and bowing entirely to the numbers and charts. The chance we have now is to use both our heads and our new tools. As players and practitioners at the Predictive Index, we have a special vantage point. In this book, I'll lay out what we've learned about talent optimization and how it lifts morale, builds teams, and turbocharges productivity. I'll show you how science and technology are teeing up a management revolution, and offer ideas and best practices about how to get started in this new and crucially important realm. In each chapter, I will present a detailed explanation of actionable steps, as well as different tools and resources that you can use right away. The new approach is not simply a matter of tests and data, but also communication and psychology. In a healthy workplace, people have to be able to talk to each other, express themselves honestly, and not guard secrets. They'll only do this in a workplace where they do not get in trouble for telling uncomfortable truths. These are cultural issues, and they're every bit as important as the new sciences. In fact, they work together, because they all contribute to an enterprise that communicates seamlessly, that pulsates with information and insights, one that's aware. These cultural issues and the seamless flow of information can face big stresses. While we were writing this book, the COVID-19 virus spread around the world and paralyzed large sectors of the economy. The pandemic forced countless companies, including our own, to switch to remote work and slash costs, including payroll. I'll describe the challenges of optimizing talent in a time of crisis and maintaining culture in a remote workforce. One thing is abundantly clear. It's a lot easier to manage through a crisis with a culture steeped in communication. Quite simply, if people know what's going on, they can respond more quickly. This makes the enterprise more nimble and resilient. And if managers have a read on different employees' personalities and preferences, they can take steps to provide them with what they need, whether it's more space, guidance, and feedback, or less of it. Simply put, knowledge about the people in an enterprise, whether from a conversation or an assessment, is invaluable. Yet this is where I have to raise a cautionary flag. In enterprises marked by distrust, secrets, and ruling cliques, these methods can be poisonous. Take, for example, a school district that's at odds with a teachers' union. Then imagine the teacher's angry response if the district tried to impose cognitive testing on them. If employees do not feel aligned with the company and its goals, if they feel they're being used, they will have fears, legitimate ones, about how this information will be put to use and who has access to it. Mastery of this science, and doing it right, is quickly becoming a competitive must. If companies create an exciting place to work, where people feel they're in the right roles and positioned to grow, those companies become destinations, attracting greater and better talent. It's a virtuous circle. Recognizing and nurturing great colleagues is at the heart of talent optimization. The central purpose of this science and this book is to give each person the best possible chance to succeed, grow, and feel fulfilled. That's a stretch goal, of course, but one we consider worthy of pursuit. 1. The new HR tools. At the height of the Industrial Revolution, in 1890, a jeweler in Auburn, New York, named Willard LeGrand Bundy, patented the first time clock. This mechanical recorder established time discipline in offices and factories. Workers who punched in even a minute late could be docked pay. The so-called Bundy clocks furnished a vital statistic. With their data, it was possible to calculate the value, whether in tons, bushels, or dollar revenue, of each worked hour. This counting machine helped to launch scientific management. Over the following century, employers raced to ramp up productivity and to shave off waste. At the zenith of this industrial age, Japanese automakers operated vast plants that ran like clockwork, with just-in-time components reaching the right worker at the right moment. With such optimized processes, manufacturers could calculate the value not just of worker hours, but of their minutes. What stood out about this ever-advancing science, however, was that it focused on the process and not on the individuals engaged in it. The people were nearly interchangeable, like the gaskets and chassis they assembled. In fact, the entire scheme was engineered to make it virtually worker-agnostic. After all, a process whose goal is 99.9999% quality must be impervious to the variations in human aptitude and performance. Otherwise, changes in the workforce, for better or worse, would cause quality numbers to fluctuate. So, for a century, the human being was largely left out of scientific management. Humans were too unpredictable and hard to measure. Human resources departments, consequently, developed at the margins of the business. In their offices, usually somewhere down the hall from accounting, they managed risk. They tried to prevent the company from getting sued and focused on adapting hiring and benefits practices to a slew of regulations and best practices. This was necessary work, but it had nothing to do with strategy. Have you ever seen a triumphant HR executive on the cover of Forbes or Fortune? Here's the paradox. While HR developed as a stolid, rules-bound bulwark against risk, the asset that HR was managing, human beings, made up by far the most valuable part of all but the most capital-intensive enterprises. Payroll gobbles up about 60% of an average company's spending, and people make all the difference. In the information economy, a talented and high-functioning team doesn't merely rise to the top. Good teams obliterate the competition. Yet to this day, most companies' talent strategies still look like boxes in Excel. They're not all that different from the crude numbers generated by Mr. Bundy's clocks. Why is this? We have not given HR professionals the tools they need to assert their role in strategy. Until recently, they haven't had the mandate or the wherewithal to figure out workers, to spot their strengths, and to deploy them in situations where they're most likely to thrive. We in the information and tools business have failed HR. Meanwhile, with the advance of technology, loads of other business applications have raced ahead. Logistics is now a precision science, informed by sensors and fine-tuned by analytics. Advertising, long plastered on pages and broadcast to masses, is increasingly calibrated and delivered to the individual. Indeed, we're statistically optimized as consumers, patients, voters, even potential terrorists. But human resources, lacking modern tools and data, has remained largely impervious to science. Until recently, it's been a backwater of by-the-gut thinking, such as, should we hire the guy with the neck tattoo? I can't really handle it. Or, Jane kills it in sales. She'll be an okay manager, right? Worth a try, I guess. These are crucial decisions, and they're often the result of guesswork, bias, and wishful thinking. Anything but science. Now managers have a broad and fast-growing range of tools and techniques to assess human workers, including themselves. While some of these, such as intelligence tests and personality assessments, have been around for decades, a galaxy of data-generating tools is opening up in the people-managing market. We'll provide an overview of this expanding tool chest in this chapter. But before we start, it's important to note that when it comes to understanding and managing people, including ourselves, the old stuff still counts for more than the new. The foundation of a self-aware enterprise rests upon age-old standards that Plato would recognize. Clear and honest communication, fairness, transparency, and accountability. Without a basis in trust, employees will regard the new arsenal of HR tools and techniques as intrusive and controlling, like strings on a marionette. When this happens, workplaces turn toxic. The company's Glassdoor ratings plummet, and star employees skedaddle. That's the opposite of talent optimization. When managed correctly, though, these tools can help transform an enterprise. The entire field is driven by a bold imperative based upon a new belief that it's possible at this stage of our economic evolution to manage portfolios of human skills. This is proving, as we'll see, to be transformative. The key is to learn more about each individual. The HR model in sports. If the management model for the industrial age was a hyper-efficient Toyota plant, the template for the information age might be a professional sports franchise. In sports, unlike manufacturing, there can be no doubt that the laborers are by far the most valuable resource. There's a simple word for them: talent. And the key to championships is to hire the most talented players and put them where they're most likely to thrive, while organizing them in teams that work together smoothly. Championship squads from Bayern Munich to the New England Patriots recruit and deploy their talent more effectively than the also-rans in their leagues. How do they do it? Through most of sports history, coaches and managers relied heavily on their eyes and gut instincts, supplemented by received wisdom handed down through the generations. Certain managers and scouts boasted of their superior feel for talent. Certain players, like Hollywood actors, just looked perfect for the part. What's more, the front offices lacked sophisticated tools and metrics. In the late 1990s, Billy Beane, a bust as a major league player, was the general manager of a low-budget baseball franchise, the Oakland A's. As Michael Lewis wrote in Moneyball, the bestseller about the data revolution Beane spawned, Beane had no choice but to innovate if he hoped to compete with richer franchises, like the New York Yankees or the Boston Red Sox. Those clubs spent more than 4 times his budget for talent. Beane would have to figure out how to win with less. So he launched an HR revolution in baseball. His goal, the same as ours today, was talent optimization. He and his team, which included an MIT stats whiz named Paul DePodesta, studied each player's statistics, including a bunch that few paid much attention to. Looking back on those early days, Beane remembers hiring a bunch of apparent misfits. One was a burly Canadian outfielder named Matt Stairs. Short and heavy, some might even call him fat, Stairs hardly looked like a prototypical slugger. By 1997, he had bounced back and forth between the minor leagues and the Boston Red Sox, where he had managed to hit only 1 home run. He was old for a prospect, pushing 28. This made him inexpensive, a big plus for the penny-pinching A's. Beane and his number-crunching team scrutinized Stairs' minor league stats, including his walks and strikeouts. They ran them through statistical models and concluded that this unlikely Canadian was a potential star. Over the following 5 years, Stairs smashed 122 home runs for the A's, as he and a host of other apparent misfits and cast-offs blended into a division-winning team. "We scored a lot of runs and won a lot of games," Beane says, "and we did it cheaply." Moneyball turned baseball from a business run on folk wisdom and gut instinct into a science. Since Beane's early triumphs with the A's, the entire baseball industry has rated math and computer science departments at elite universities for premium data analysts. A former industry of he-men has been taken over, to a large extent, by nerds. To carry out their revolution, they're expanding their tool chest. Every year they find new things to count, and they continue to install the latest sensors and gauges to measure each player's performance. Since 2015, every major league stadium has installed a surveillance setup called StatCast. This enables the new masters of baseball's HR to count the revolutions of each pitcher's curveballs and the degree of dip on his sinker. They can track the exit velocity of a grounder to shore.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?